Now the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to call today's meeting to order. First line of business would be approval of minutes for March 30th, 2021. Commissioners' thoughts, comments? Commissioner Burkett, welcome. I don't think you were here that day, so you'll probably abstain from that approval.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a first and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Commissioners, I'd like to move commission reports and comments and staff comments to after closed session, if that's okay. What I'd like to entertain now is a motion to go into closed session.
Motion to go in closed session.
Is there a second?
Second.
I have a first and a second. Hearing no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
5-0. Thank you very much. Commissioners' reports and comments. Vice President Baker.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Just like I know every county commissioner and every county employee is with Krista Hart and her family through these hard times, the loss of her father. Just want to know that the prayers and the wishes are abundant for her, and we'd like to just like to say hello, Krista, and I hope you are doing good. Also, I'd like to welcome Mr. Burkett, our new county commissioner. Welcome. I think you'll be an excellent addition to the county commissioner team, and looking forward to working with you. So thank you. Also, read in the paper there, I believe it was yesterday, where school board's looking for bus drivers. So if there's anyone out there that wants to drive a bus, I'd encourage you to get a hold of the Board of Education to see if you're a good fit for the employment there. And it also reminds me of the Cascade community and the Hancock community schools. Once, if they decide not to keep those schools open, the need for possibly more buses, more drivers, that could be another hardship on education and families in the Cascade and Hancock community. And also, I even thought about the contract drivers. I don't know how many contract drivers we have now, but they were just thoughts that went through my head. And so as they deliberate next week or get the report on from the FEAC study, I'm sure that they'll be mindful of buses, transportation, additional buses, additional drivers, things like that needed. So hopefully that'll be just another reason to deter shutting those schools down. I think they all know that I'm in support of keeping the schools open in both the Cascade and the Hancock community. Also, I'd like to congratulate and thank Delegate or Senator Quarterman for his efforts in bringing the baseball stadium to Washington County, and his team. What a tremendous team he put together there to get that baseball stadium money to be built here in Washington County. I just wanted to say thank you, congratulate you, and my job now as a county commissioner is to stay out of your way and to wish you nothing but the best. And I think you guys will do an awesome job moving forward with that stadium. So congratulations to Paul Quarterman and his team. And then one last thing, I've been getting some calls on this BAT septic system. I think a few years ago it was mandated by the state of Maryland, which we mandated, so the county was forced to enforce the rules of the BAT system. And I've had a family reach out to me. They'd like to go back to the conventional system because they don't require the BAT system anymore. They found out that it wasn't as effective as they once thought it was. It cost a tremendous amount more money to install than a conventional, and then they have a yearly maintenance agreement that they have to be a part of also with that BAT system. And now they're trying to go back to the conventional, and there's no help for them. They were forced to spend, and I forget the amount of money, extra thousands and thousands of dollars to install a BAT system that is not as effective as the experts once thought. And now we're trying to find some grant information to see, and I'm working through our county grants office, so if I get any information to where there's a possible grant to help these families get back to a conventional system and help defer some of the cost to the grant, I'll keep you all informed. So I'm hopeful that our team could possibly find something to help these families go back to a conventional septic system. So that concludes my morning announcements. Thank you.
Commissioner Kiefer?
Yes, I have several comments as well. My sympathies also to our county clerk, Krista Hart, and her family. I believe her father was also most recently a bailiff at our circuit courthouse right across the street. So I'm sure his family at the courthouse is also mourning his loss as well. I had an opportunity to go on the bus ride last week that the town of Hancock put on to demonstrate the long ride it took to pick up the farthest student west to transport them to Clear Spring High School, should that be the move they make. The bus ride as a straight shot without making meaningful stops to demonstrate picking up students and dropping students off one way lasted about an hour, but contemplating for those anticipated stops, drop-offs, and different roads that you would have to travel on, we traveled a straight shot. It's estimated that the bus ride for students will take 3.5 hours total to get to school and to get back home. I like to put things into perspective, and I just did a Google Maps search. That's the same distance as from Washington County to Ocean City, Maryland, time-wise, if you were to travel to Ocean City. So that is what will be asked of these students, a daily trip to Ocean City in order for them to get to school.
They may like that idea.
Let me be clear, it's not Ocean City.
I know.
They're going
I'm
to.
trying to emphasize and accentuate your statement on that. Very good comparison.
That's a lengthy trip, and certainly that will have wear down those students when they get to school, when they get home. I hope that that is taken into perspective as well. You know, some people ask, I think, why are the commissioners involved and why are we making a statement about this? It's not our vote at the end of the day, but I think it's worth pointing out that first and foremost, those people that this vote will impact, the students and the parents and the teachers, they are our constituents as well. So that gives us every right to have an opinion and to represent them. And about half of our operating budget goes towards funding education in Washington County. And I think we're all elected to have a little bit of input into how tax dollars are spent. Second, I'd like to report that Commissioner Klein and I met last week also with the leadership of the newly established Fraternal Order of Police Lodge here in Washington County that will be representing the Washington County Sheriff's deputies. And I just wanted to express my support for their establishment of the FOP to represent their deputies. A few bad actors in law enforcement and some very unfriendly police legislation coming out of Annapolis is making their job harder and harder all the time, and it's making it harder for us to recruit qualified deputies into law enforcement, into a career. And so any protections that the union can provide for them while they fulfill their job, I'm in full support of. So I just wanted to mention that also. And finally, welcome to our new county commissioner, Mr. Charlie Burkett. It was about 5 years ago, almost to the day that I was sworn in when I first received my appointment as a county commissioner. It probably feels like a lot at times, taking in a lot of information, but it's very rewarding. You'll spend a lot of time doing your job, working with your constituents, trying to balance family time as well, but I think you'll do a great job with it. Look forward to working with you. And you know, Washington County, our citizens deserve 5 commissioners. And when I was appointed, someone told me, and I think it was good advice, you may not be here as an elected member, but you're here according to how the law reads to fill a vacancy for county commissioners. So that doesn't negate any way your 20% of the vote. So you are a full county commissioner nonetheless. So keep that in mind, and congratulations. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Kiefer. Commissioner Burkett, you're up.
I just want to start by thanking God and my family who were willing to give up some of their privacy so that I could serve the community in this way. I also want to thank the Central Republican Committee for nominating me, and the governor for appointing me, and the Maryland Senate for confirming me. Finally, I want to thank Delegate Neil Parrott for his support and advice as we were going through the process, and each of the commissioners that I called before I was appointed for their advice, and who took the time to speak with me, and then especially the public, who's been really supportive and positive about all this. It's been definitely a change in my life. Since my swearing in last Tuesday, I've been busy meeting with county staff, which included spending 2.5 hours with the county CFO, Sarah Graves. And she spent those 2.5 hours bringing me up to date on financial and budget issues. On Friday, I spent the day with Commissioner Kiefer, and we visited 3 of our local communities. In Clear Spring, I was able to meet with Mayor Hose and Town Clerk Juanita Grimm, and some of the council members were there. We then went to Hancock and met with the town manager, Joe Gilbert, and then lastly, we spent some time with Mayor Bill Green in Williamsport. And I do want to make special mention of my meeting with the Hancock town manager, Joe Gilbert. Mr. Gilbert has been working hard in Hancock for a number of years, working on getting grants and funding for a bunch of different projects, and it looks like his hard work's about to pay off this year. As we drove around, I could not help but getting excited for the town of Hancock and the many things that are going to happen up there real soon. Finally, I was pleased to see the closing sale of Fort Ritchie property after years of issues. It'll be nice to have that whole thing off the backs of the citizens of Washington County. I spoke briefly a few weeks ago with the buyer, and it sounds like he has some really great ideas for that property up there. And so I wish him well, and think it'll be a boost to the community of Cascade. And I find it interesting that those 2 areas that I mentioned last that have real exciting things happening are the 2 areas that the Board of Education is talking about closing schools in. And I think this would do a lot of damage to what I see as some exciting growth potential over the next several years. Again, thanks to everyone for their support and well wishes. I look forward to getting around to the different communities in Washington County and meeting the staff here in the county.
Thank you, Commissioner Burkett. Commissioner Wagner.
Well, welcome, Charles Burkett. That'll be my statement, and Wayne sort of summed it up as the commissioner. But I'm glad you joined us, and I'm sure we can work together. The second one was Terry hit on the stadium. I agree with Terry said. They did what I wanted them to do. We don't own it, and we didn't put the money in and finance it. We still have a building to contend with, though. But I think it's sitting about home plate, isn't it? But Blackie Bowen stepped up as a public, citizen, and he's taken on a lot of the burden and some of the expense, and I commend Blackie for that, and Paul for getting it through. Fort Ritchie, I guess to me that was a long-awaited time. It's been quite a while since the first contract was signed, the first settlement date came and went. I think Mr. Krumpetich has a lot of good plans for Fort Ritchie. I would sort of like to make a formal request now. We've talked about it before, but to date, our carrying charge on that's been about $600,000. I would like somebody to move forward with some legal manner of recovering our losses on that covering for probably a year or better, but it's about $600,000. That's not counting expenses we incurred as attorney fees, and I'm not even sure about the new owner's expenses. That's his attorney's problems, but we shouldn't let that $600,000 when 2 judges ruled it was not a justified lawsuit just come out of citizens' pockets. That's our carrying charge. So I'd like to see a plan to recover that in the near future. And that's pretty much all I have to say on that. And I guess the next question is for you, John. When is the citizens going to be allowed to come back in for comments?
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up and wanted to talk to the commissioners about when we want to do that. I mean, as you know, the numbers in Washington County are still higher than we like them to be. I talked to Earl Stoner about it. you know, he would still, I think, prefer that we do not open it up to the public, but we could do it similar to what you did it before, where we'd limit the number, and we would have to sign up ahead of time and what they were gonna discuss, and we could bring them in one at a time, and then have them come in and present whatever they wanted to present, and then leave.
Right.
So, if the board is interested in that, we could start to plan for that, you know, in the next week or two.
By appointment, like?
We would do it. I think the last time, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we had a place where people could call and make an appointment. We were limited. I'm thinking 3 is in my mind, but I don't know. I'm looking at Kirk just to see if, so we will limit the number of people. They could sign up ahead of time, because we would know who was coming, and we can make arrangements to meet them and bring them in, and then.
Actually, if there was I guess if you had a half a dozen people crossed up there, separated socially distances, and 1 or 2 at the, if it called for that, that's up to the commissioners, but that's just my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I don't, you know, I mean, I was thinking, you know, we would transition into it, but I mean, that would be okay too. I'm not stuck with the number 3, that's just what
How's the public
it.
hearing for the water sewer rates going to work? Are they going to be able to, appear personally, or is it all going to be virtual?
Right now, it's all, I mean, it's all.
We
you have
keep
to-
the record open for a week, is how we've been doing with our public hearings.
That's how.
For
that's how
commentary,
we do it.
phone calls, and
On
emails.
the public hearing, water sewer rates?
I mean, that's scheduled for today, so no, I mean, the public is not.
We,
It's today, right? Isn't it?
sorry.
Public hearing is today. on
At
water
11.
sewer.
For my opinion, I'm in favor of reopening, similar to how we did last year. If we're limiting it to a certain number of individuals, that's fine.
Okay.
I would also say if we have another public hearing, if we could also keep that window time frame open for a week, because if we're only allowing 3 people in per day per meeting, that wouldn't allow for everyone to come in and comment.
Right.
So I'd like to do both if we can, just to keep our meetings and
Right.
public comment, you know, as accessible as possible,
Okay.
Right.
given
I
everything.
I
Yeah,
agree.
it's
I
a good
agree.
idea.
So
Okay.
good enough instructions
So
to move
staff-
forward with the plan?
Staff, we will implement that.
And back to Terry's comment on the VAT system, I'm right with you on that, Terry. If there is help out there, I believe, but it's enormously expensive. To me, it's unjustified. It's like 35 grand plus to put a VAT system in. And with the cost of building now and the materials, you know, 2x4 is what, $9? It's just getting out of hand, and we just shouldn't put the kind of a burden on. But I think there is grants out there, I
Well, there's
believe.
some grants, but my research, you have to, income guidelines.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay, well then, yeah. But anyway, it'd be nice if we can't do much about it unless with a democratic legislation, but
Okay, Commissioner Wagner, anything else?
that's it.
All right, thank you. Again, I'd like to express my sympathies for Krista Hart for the passing of her father. Also like to welcome Commissioner Burkett to the team. Thank you very much for your willingness to serve. Congratulations to Senator Quarterman, Senator Everett, and all those involved in bringing baseball back to Hagerstown. For those that don't know, but the famous Boots Poffenberger and my famous Uncle Dave Cole pitched an exhibition game at Municipal Stadium, and I'm sure they'd be proud to know that Hagerstown, Washington County is keeping baseball alive. I'd also like to mention that I attended the World Heritage Open House event down at the Ag Center over the weekend. I met with the family of Ken and Marge Peters. If you recall, Ken and Marge were very dedicated and loyal supporters to that whole entire facility, and there was a dedication of a bench in her name in front of the Farney pharmacy down there, and just big heartfelt thanks to Marge and Ken for all the efforts that they put in that facility down there. Last week, April 11th, in 1935, 14 souls from Williamsport High School perished in a car accident at a railroad crossing in Rockville, Maryland, returning from a school trip on a rainy day. That was an awful event for the community, but one of the things that arose out of that tragedy was legislation for railroad crossings, which may have since then saved many other lives. But that's a very large mark on the time frame in the history of Williamsport. Also want to thank Wayne for joining me with the FOP people the other day. Just a quiet, nice conversation, a fellowship over a meal to talk about the needs and stuff of our officers for the future. I did also join Commissioner Kiefer for the bus ride. I only went for half of it, but while on that trip, I lost cell service at least 3 times. The ride was arduous. I can imagine a young student forgetting their homework on the kitchen table and having to go from Clear Spring back to Hancock to get their homework off the table. Just maybe a small example of maybe some of the inconveniences, but I believe that the Hancock School should be kept open. I also, over our break, attended an event at the Cascade Rec Center, and many people up there wanting to keep Cascade Elementary School open. In light of the Fort Ritchie sale going through, there was a lot of positive comments from the community. I want to thank Mr. John Krumpetich for his efforts in spearheading that event. With economic development and all the things that Commissioner Burkett mentioned going up in Hancock, I believe they also were the recipients of over $18 million for their infrastructure system. You have that type of infrastructure being repaired or brought to life, you know economic development and economy is going to survive up there. So to keep the schools in Hancock and Cascade would be a favorable outcome for all Washington County. And I too would again reiterate that I'd like to begin opening up our meetings to the citizens and that we can roll out a plan. And I know the percent of the COVID percent does dictate some of that. We're seeing, well, I'll just say there the weekend, a good friend of mine lost his wife, age 60, but double pneumonia COVID, and it just, when it happens to you, it's a tragedy. So taking precautions, I think, is diligent upon us. But again, we still need to get the public back in front of us, even though they're good at sending emails and phone calls. So that would be my support of all the commissioners in bringing back citizens' participation and people into the facilities. With that being said, that closes my comments, and I'd like to open up to the next agenda item, which is amendments to the retirement plan. Mr. Downey, would you please come forward and? Oh,
Sorry.
yeah, I'm
We'll do
sorry.
staff comments after.
Yeah, we'll do staff comments. My mistake. Thank you. I'm trying to get you out of here, Mr. Downey.
I appreciate that very much.
You're welcome.
So what you have before you is an amendment and restatement of the Employees Retirement Plan of Washington County. It incorporates many of the changes that have been discussed and approved by this board over the past couple of years. It adds some clarification and flexibility for moving forward on actuarial matters. It also provides clarification of provisions that were needed some additional explanation for how they would operate, how people would be able to use or purchase credited service and unused sick leave. And it incorporates provisions into the plan that are required by some changes in federal law. And so that's what's before you today, proposed that it be adopted.
Move to amend and restate the Employees Retirement Plan of Washington County as proposed.
Okay, is that a motion?
I'll second.
I have a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Dan. Appreciate your efforts.
Thank you.
Now we'll go back to, anything? Okay. Now we'll go back to staff comments. Anybody here for staff? Mr. Downey?
No comments except to say welcome to Commissioner Burkett.
John?
Okay, good morning, Commissioners. I just have a few. Obviously, welcome to Commissioner Burkett. We've had some discussions, and I know you met with some county staff, and hopefully in the next few weeks, we'll be able to arrange for you to meet with a number of other county staff, and we'll get you out to the other areas so you can meet them and they can meet you, and we'll try to answer any questions that you have. So welcome. I do want to say, and you've all mentioned it, but on behalf of county staff, I do want to express our deepest sympathies to the family of Teddy Hart, who, as Commissioner Kiefer mentioned, was a bailiff. I think he was a city police officer before that, and he was a bailiff here with Washington County. And specifically to his daughter and our county clerk, Krista Hart. Our thoughts and prayers are with that family today. Also, wanted to mention that I was looking at the county commissioner meeting schedule, and April 27th, there's no meeting scheduled. And I've been asking around as to see why we're not meeting on that day. If anyone has any idea why we're not scheduled to meet on that day, you can let me know. I'm not really sure. So the question I have for the commissioners, if there's not a reason not to meet, whether you would be interested in meeting on that day, give us I don't know what we'll have to discuss, but we'll probably have a lot of budget things to discuss and other things to discuss. So on the schedule right now, we're not supposed to meet, but I just want to see if the board was interested in actually meeting on that day.
We don't have to decide today, we can wait till we get closer to that day.
Right, we can decide next week, but I was looking through it and I was sort of surprised that there was no meeting scheduled, and so I started asking around because I thought there may be a reason, but there may be, I just don't know what it is. So if you keep that in mind, we can discuss it again next week to see if we have topics that we want to discuss, we can meet on the 27th. And one other thing I do want to mention, I saw this morning, and I saw always there in the back. It looks like it's the Public Safety Telecommunicators Week this week. So I just wanted to mention to our 911 dispatchers that on behalf of the Board of County Commissioners and staff, that we appreciate everything the 911 dispatchers do. I don't know if you have any comments to that, or if you would like to make a comment, but.
No, they, there's a vital part of the system. The first one to talk to somebody, sometimes they'll ask people to talk to them.
Right.
Yes, so they do like lunches. It'd be a good gesture. We do have some people in the community sending meals to them for appreciation this week.
Okay, well, we will, please pass on our appreciation to them on behalf of the board and county staff and the citizens of Washington County for all the work, and I know they work, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, so we appreciate them. If you could pass that on, and if anyone's listening, I just wanted to let them know that we appreciate them and we want to recognize them today. And Commissioner Klein, I think that's all I have today.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is the public hearing at 11. We're a little early. Would anybody mind if we skip down to the next item for the community organizational funding? Are you okay with that, Susan? Or would you please come forward and introduce yourself in the matter? And we'll come back to the 11 o'clock hearing.
Well, I came down early. Good morning, Susan Buchanan, Director, Office of Grant Management, here this morning requesting a motion to approve the revised Community Organization Funding Committee recommendations for FY22 as presented or with any amendments. The Community Organization Funding Committee's funding recommendations were presented to the Board of Commissioners on March 9th, 2021. Those recommendations provided 0 funding to 9 requests. The Board of County Commissioners requested that the committee reconvene to distribute up to $100,000 to the non-funded applications in a fair and equitable manner. The Community Organization Funding Committee held a special meeting on March 25th, 2021 to determine revised funding recommendations utilizing up to $100,000 of the additional funding to provide some level of funding to the 9 applicants who originally were not funded. After review and discussion of the applications, revised recommendations were determined and approved by the committee. The committee allocated $55,000 through the process and then requested that the Board of County Commissioners determine whether to allocate some or all of the remaining $45,000 and or return the remaining funds to the general fund budget. I did provide an attachment, and if you would direct your attention to that document, you can see this spreadsheet contains all the requests. You can also see the average score for each application, the original recommendations that the committee presented, and then to the far right, you can see the 9 previously unfunded applications, what the revised recommendations were for. So I'd be happy to answer any questions related to these recommendations.
those 9, how do I find them within that
If
sheet?
you look down, I don't know how your printout is, if it's 2 pages, it would be
Front and back.
on the second half of the worksheet, and they are the ones that on the,
Gotcha, okay.
the one that have the dashes on the second to the, yes.
So all 9 got funded something,
Yes.
correct?
All 9 were given at some level of funding.
I'd probably myself want to return the rest to general fund, but that's just me talking, so.
Well, exactly where was that 100,000 directed to come from if we,
I think
I'd love.
Sarah knows that question.
The 100,000 is coming from the excess surplus for fiscal year '22, so it's part of that figure.
So you would return it to the general fund, Sarah? Is that where it goes back to, or?
Yes, for the
Yeah.
board to appropriate. So I'll be coming to you later today to inquire as to the excess for '22 and where it shall be appropriated. And so if the funding is not designated to the COF, it can be used for other things.
Okay, Commissioners, thoughts, comments, motion to accept that award, those awards?
Motion to accept as presented, and Sarah will be discussing what to do with the remaining
Okay,
part
all
of the $100,000 and.
right. I have a first, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, a first and a second, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're still about 20 minutes early for our 11 o'clock public hearing. Is Mr. Boggs in the area?
There was nobody out there when I just went out there. I'm trying to get everybody to come early.
It's okay. Commissioners, I'd like to stay on time for 11. We'll take a brief recess, come back in about 10 minutes to stay on time for the public hearing. Public hearing, modification of water and sewer rates. The purpose of this hearing is to hear public testimony concerning the matter. The procedure is as follows. We will first have staff introduce the testimony. Each speaker will give about 3 minutes to testify. After everyone who speaks has done so, the hearing will close. I guess what we're referring to there is the meeting's going to stand for about testimony for about a week. Mr. Downey, is that correct?
Yes, because of the COVID situation, the fact that government buildings are closed to public access at this point, what we intend to do is to leave the record open so that the public can comment on the presentation made here this morning. That record will stay open until the close of business on Monday, April 19th. So anyone who wants to make any comments can send them in writing to the County Commissioners, 100 West Washington Street, Suite 1101, Hagerstown, Maryland 21740, or you can mail your comments to Rachel McCarty. Her email is rmccarty@washco-md.net. And again, if they could be, we're taking comments. We're happy to hear comments. You can also call and leave a message for the clerk as well. But comments need to be received by close of business on next Monday.
So on that date, we'll be bringing this back for discussion or commissioners' input, correct? So, okay,
Yes.
Yep.
All right, staff, would you please introduce yourself in the matter?
Good morning, Commissioners. Sarah Greaves, Chief Financial Officer.
Mark Bradshaw, Director of Environmental Management.
Welcome to the public hearing for modification of water and sewer rates for fiscal year '22. Water and sewer revenue requirements show that an increase in water and sewer revenue is necessary to facilitate the Department of Water Quality's long-range financial plans. The presented rate schedule is based on this requirement and is attached to the ARF.
The rate changes are as follows. Residential full service customer will go to $132.92. Commercial 1 full service $137.98. Commercial 2 $140.76. Commercial 3 $140.76. Volunteer services $132.92. residential commercial collection service fee, $62.13. And then the volume charges per 1,000 gallons for sewer will be residential $8.14, commercial 1 $8.69, commercial 2 $9.88, commercial 3 $6.79, volunteer services $8.14, and then the non-metered sewer accounts will be $181.76. The wholesale rate will go to $8.02 per 1,000 gallons, and then the connection fees will go to $7,300 for sewer connection. Those are the proposed rates for the sewer. The water proposed rates are as follows. Residential full service, $107.15. Commercial 1, $108.46. Commercial 2, $133.93. Volunteer services, $107.15. And then the volume charges for 1,000 gallons are as follows. Residential, $12.40. Commercial 1, $12.47. Commercial 2, $9.63. Volunteer services, $12.40. And then the non-meter water accounts will be $181.55. And the connection fee will be $2,700. Those are the proposed water and sewer rates as included on your ARC.
I'm not sure, maybe, Mark, if you have a different number than was attached, but I just noticed two differences in the numbers that you read and what's listed as the rates. So I have for sewer rates, non-metered is $181.71. You had originally stated 76, but it's actually 181.71, and then the connection fee is 7,200, not 7,300, as stated. So I just make that correction for the record. And for information, using a 12,000 gallon benchmark, each 3.5% rate increase costs the average user about $6 per quarter or $2 per month is an increase. This increase is necessary to sustain the operations of these funds. The rate increase will be lower for those individuals or families who use less than 6,000 gallons per quarter, and that is because the base charge is not increasing by 3.5%. We have made some structural changes in the water quality funds to help save money. One of the major changes or reductions in costs is attributed to the 96A bond issue being paid off, and we've also reduced staffing where possible to generate personnel savings. These measures have helped the funds, but unfortunately we still have a shortfall that needs addressed. The water fund continues to face operational shortfall and requires a general fund subsidy for fiscal year 22 of $187,280. This shortage includes the assumption of the 3.5% rate increase that we're presenting today. If no rate increase is approved, the general fund subsidy will need to be increased by $26,000. Expenditures exceed revenues in the sewer fund by $626,000. There is no general fund appropriation for fiscal year 22 for the sewer fund, but rather cash reserves will be used to bridge this gap. This does include the assumption of the 3.5% increase for sewer. Incremental increases over a period of time was the plan from the start to get the water and sewer funds to a self-supported status, and we must continue efforts towards that in meeting our long-range goals. Any questions by the commissioners? Okay. With that, like Mr. Downey said, comments will be accepted through the end of day next Monday. And anything from you, Mark?
I do have a question. On your water rates, I thought I read there, resident full oh, never mind, that's per thousand. Never mind. I thought it was down.
Okay.
I just saw the 5.3% increase there
For the volume charge. Yes. So overall, it's still a 3.5% increase. The volume charge is a little bit higher based on the rate model results, but the base charge is lower, which does help those families.
What's been the average increase over the last couple of years?
Over the last couple years, the average increase has been about 3.5%. Now, last year, water rates did not increase. They were proposed to increase, but they did not. So,
Is that found within their own budget, that increase?
they delayed hiring, I believe, several personnel until December to try to
And you
absorb.
had referenced, you've cut staffing.
We have reduced
So
staffing.
what's the number of employees that were there last year and how many we're gonna have this year? Or is this one of the departments that's putting in for a new employee?
No.
Water quality is not asking for any new employees. I believe there are 7 or 8 positions on hold. These positions are on hold until the fund can support itself, and until it's self-sustaining. And so they are committed to not hiring until that time, even if it means 2023 or 2024.
If I recall correctly, I believe last year the reason we didn't have a water rate increase, the proposed rate increase would be to fill it, like it was like a $10,000 gap, and we asked staff to find savings within the department for $10,000 rather than absolving that rate increase just for $10,000.
Correct, and we delayed hiring, some
And
of
that's
the
how you
water
did it.
positions for 6 months in order to offset that, differential.
Hey, Mark, I commend you for not putting the hiring on freeze to help this out. Is that, how much overtime is that generating? Is it generating more? You don't have to tell me a figure, but is it weighing out? Are we really killing ourselves with overtime?
I think the water side, I think overtime was $26,000 last year total. I can't remember what the number is this year, so that's not too bad
That's
on
not,
the water side.
that's not what I've heard in the past.
The sewer side, generally any overtime associated with sewers associated with breaks, which
Right.
seems like they always happen at night and weekends and holidays.
That's overtime anyway.
So
Yeah.
overtime is within reason, other than we have to deal with breaks, of course, when they happen.
Right.
If personnel was further reduced, though, I think it would impact the department as a whole. The 7 positions that were put on hold, there was a lot of thought going into those, and you know, we didn't want to disrupt the operation more than we had to, and so what we've tried to do is, you know, reduce or put on hold those positions that could be delayed without causing large amounts of overtime that may contribute to other issues like
Right.
people quitting or morale issues and stuff like that, to reasonably continue operations with that adjustment.
Mark, can you talk a little bit about the connection fee, what that goes towards? And only because last week I heard a comment about that connection fee. And can you explain what that's used for, what that represents?
The connection fees generally in the model go toward the upgrades associated with the treatment plants. Because we just upgraded Conococheague plant, and that was a $30 million upgrade. So generally the connection fees are used to offset the construction costs associated with the said upgrades. The rates generally cover the operational expenses.
In prior years, you know, there have been a couple years where rates were suggested for increase, but not the connection fees, and there were comments about, you know, why are the connection fees not also increasing? And the rate model does show that they should increase along with the rates to our users.
So when was the last time we increased the connection fee?
Several years,
I can't recall.
I think 4 to 6 years. It's been a while.
5.
It's been a while.
Connection fees ever waived or anything like that?
We don't have the authority to waive connection fees. Requests have been made on charitable contributions, and they came before you, and yous have used your contingency fund and paid the sewer fund accordingly.
Anything that results with connection fees has to come before the commission.
That is correct. That's how it's always been handled in the past. If a nonprofit were to request it, it would be brought before you to make that decision. If yous want to, yous haven't waived them. Yous have paid the water and sewer fund out of your contingency fund accordingly.
It can't be just waived, there has to be a payment from
Right.
somewhere, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Staff doesn't have the authority to do that,
Correct.
and staff doesn't have the money to pay, so it would have to come from somewhere. So it would come for you to approval, and then you'd have to decide where the money was gonna come from. on a case-by-case basis, right?
Correct.
Commissioners, thoughts, comments?
I'm
Not
good.
this concludes the commentary testimony until next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
They should be out.
Yes, next are Historic Foundation, Rural Legacy. Chris Boggs, if you're out there listening. Okay, we can go to
We can go to Jonathan first.
Jonathan. We're going to back up and go to you for staff reports, please. Please introduce yourself in the matter.
Morning, Commissioners. Jonathan Horowitz, Department of Business Development. Sorry about the backup staff comments here. This is a request for a letter of support from the Commissioners to support the wastewater exception number 6 for economic development projects. This is for a project north of the airport, currently being developed by Taylor Bowen. It is on 16 acres. It is an $8 to $10 million spec building project. Job creation expected to be 25 to 40 jobs.
Oh, there's 25 to 40 jobs. And I know there's no way of knowing. Do you have an idea on what percentage of those jobs will be Washington County residents?
Just given on the standing coming, going of the commuters, we would hope it'd be somewhere around 80. We have about 20 to 25%. Terry, in that neck of the
I know.
county, you're pretty
just
close to
curious.
Pennsylvania, so there may be a little bit of a difference there, but we would hope at least 80.
So you're looking for approval for submission of this letter?
Correct. Thanks, Jeff.
Commissioners, any other comments? Hearing none, motion to approve the letter.
Thank you.
I gotta get a motion to vote, sir. Don't leave us in a hurry, we like you.
Motion to approve the letter.
Second.
I have first and second, all in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Vote. Thank you, Jonathan.
Commissioners?
Next up, a little early, but I think I see Mr. Boggs. Would you please come forward? Introduce yourself in the matter.
Chris Boggs, Land Preservation Planner, Department of Planning and Zoning. Today I bring forward the Save Historic Antietam Foundation, Inc. Rural Legacy Easement Project. This is in our rural legacy area. It is 4.218 acres, so one of our smaller parcels we are looking to preserve. But the people at CHAP came to me and asked if DNR would be interested in taking the easement and permanently preserving the parcel. I checked with DNR. They said they were good with it, so we decided to move forward. This project is a little unique because it is a full donation, so there will be no compensation for the landowner for the development rights on this parcel. But we always like to get it where we can. So his property is located on Mills Road in Sharksburg, and it's got some valuable scenic, environmental, and historic characteristics on the property. It's pretty much entirely woodland. It was part of a subdivision done years ago that Schaff ended up purchasing, and there's really not a ton of development potential for it, but it's ideal to preserve just because of its location and the route for the Battle of Antietam and all of the battles that occurred there on South Mountain and all of the gaps there. It's got one development right we'll be extinguishing with the easement, and there are no dwellings or any buildings on the property. So the recommended proposal would be, hold on, first for fiscal impact, of course, there's no funds from the state that are going to the landowner, but that we will still be compensated as the county level for our compliance and administrative costs. We do, basically the way that works for these donations is we just do the easement valuation formula and come up with how much it could be worth if they were to sell it as an easement, and then the state will compensate us for all title costs and that 1.5% compliance and 3% admin costs that would be if it were paid in full. Let's see. Moving forward, the recommended motion would be to approve the Safe Historic Antietam Foundation easement project in the amount of $0 over 4.218 easement acres. Any questions?
No, I mean, sounds like a win-win deal. You get paid, they get the land free. Recommended motion is stated.
Is there a second?
I'll second with the question.
Sure.
Is there a long-term plan for this property? Is it just to preserve it
Well, yeah,
in perpetuity? Will it be excavated for like archaeological finds? Or?
Well, it could be if that were ever to be the case. A lot of the ground around it is either already preserved or it's state ground. So it kind of expands on some already state-owned ground and some other rural legacy projects. So it adds to the group of preserved land there. And of course, the goal for these projects is to preserve large swaths of open space. So it helps with our goals in that respect.
Okay, good.
Okay, I have first and second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Boggs.
Thank you.
You're running a little early, but I do believe next up is the bid award for laboratory services. Please come forward, introduce yourself. Is everybody here that you need?
Are you waiting for anybody?
Huh?
Are you waiting for anybody else?
No, Brandy's under the weather, so I'm sitting in for her, so.
Okay.
Okay, so you're gonna represent.
no,
Please introduce yourself in the matter.
Well, Marcus sitting for Davina and Becky, so.
Tell them to come arrive early.
Alrighty.
Please move forward at your convenience.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good
Rick
morning.
White, Director of Purchasing.
Mark Bradshaw, Director of Environmental Management.
Item before you is bid award PUR 1496, laboratory services for water and wastewater testing for the Department of Water Quality. Recommended motion to award laboratory services for the water wastewater testing for Department of Water Quality to the responsive bidder ALS Group USA Corporation, doing business as ALS Environmental of Middletown, Pennsylvania, who submitted the lowest annual total bid in the amount of $53,941.20. As you can see in the ARF, it spells out what the vendor is responsible for picking up samples from the Department of Water Quality and then delivering them back to them within 14 days. It's a one-year contract to commence on May 1st, and it also has 2 one-year annual renewals. Also, you can see the method in which the bid was advertised on the various medias and in the local newspaper, number of persons who downloaded the bid, and the number of bids received. Also is indicated on the bid tabulation, and the fiscal impact, showing where the department will charge the services to be paid out of. And also you have the bid tabulation of all the bidders who submitted a proposal. That concludes my recommendation for PUR 1496.
Just a curious question for me, who had that bid last year? Same people?
Yes, sir.
So this is the second consecutive year?
I think this may be the 3rd year.
Okay. But did we have to put it out for bid every year?
We have to put out a bid every 3 years by law.
Okay, every 3 years. Okay, gotcha. That's all I needed.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
First and second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. I vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I believe next up, we're still running a little early. I think We have Jonathan coming in for the expansion of the Hagerstown, Washington County Enterprise Zone. Please introduce yourself and the matter.
Good morning, Commissioners. Jonathan Horowitz, Department of Business Development. I am here basically to request the closing of the public hearing for the expansion of the Hagerstown, Washington County Enterprise Zone. This is going to be a resolution move to adopt the submission of our application to state. And this application was developed between the county and the city of Hagerstown.
Commissioners, thoughts, comments on the resolution?
So we did receive a few comments, right?
We received 3 comments from the public.
Could you please read them?
Sure.
Thank you.
Comment 1 is from Mark Dickinson. Request is hereby made to add the following properties. Basically, Mark is requesting to add 3 of his parcels as well into the enterprise zone. He's requesting in this comment that we take a look at adding his parcels into this expansion application. And do you want me to address each one or just read them?
Read them first.
Okay.
We have
So
questions.
that was the basis of Mark's. Chris Smith, another local developer property owner, has submitted a request to have his property that is off of Colonel H. Henry Douglas Drive to be added to this expansion as well. And then we also had one public comment from an Angela Davids, and she basically is just wants to protest the actual development of the Review and Herald property itself. And her stance there is that it's a beautiful property, and she simply just does not want to see it developed into warehouses.
Is there any of those you want to address about the expansion at this time that's not included in the resolution? So would that have to be another day?
I'd be happy to address them now from the Department of Business Development standpoint.
On the third question you had read there, the lady that doesn't want the warehouses, whatever could possibly occur there,
Correct.
what that company's trying to do, does it require any zoning changes?
No, it does not. They are in full
They're-
compliance with the zoning that is existing there.
And you said a couple of the other developers want their property included. So what we're voting on today is only specific to
What was it last,
the Herald.
public hearing last time?
Herald
Correct.
property.
It's not exactly just the Herald Mail property. These expansions are done by census tracts, so it's not down to the parcel level. So this census tract would include several parcels. Some are in the city and some are in the county, which is why it was a joint effort. But
We had the map last week, I think it was week before last, we had the map. How close are these, just for my curiosity again, how close are these properties of Mr. Smith to that map, that enterprise zone map we had?
Mr. Smith's property, as the crow flies, is probably 3 miles.
Okay,
And these other properties are on the other side of the county. They're significantly further away.
oh, okay.
So today we're voting on what we. had
From the public hearing
on
from
last week.
Correct. We're talking about one census tract here, which does include the R&H property.
Didn't I also hear the last time, we're limited into the amount of property we can add to the enterprise zone each, on an annual basis, I suppose?
Yes, Wayne, that's how I was gonna address the other comments, basically. The comments from these other developers, while the Department of Business Development fully supports any good development in the area, we are bound by the state. This is a state designated area, and there are lots of policies around how and how much we can add at certain times. If we were to take a look at adding anything beyond this census tract that we begin looking at, it would probably require the subtraction of other areas. And what I want the commissioners to be fully aware of is that the entire enterprise zone area is up for its standard renewal at the end of 2022. So the county and our department will be submitting a renewal application for comprehensively designing the entire enterprise zone in conjunction with the city of Hagerstown. And that process is ongoing currently. The application is due to the state by the end of 2022. And during that process, we will most certainly address the developers' inclusions that we've been asked about.
So what I'm hearing now, we just would want to move forward what we talked about last week, and there's others to be considered in the
I
future.
wanted to ask him about annexation. So when does annexation come into play? When does
The city of Hagerstown annexation, the city of Hagerstown's annexations policies are all still the same, so, once they become contiguous to a parcel, they can, due to their wastewater exception policy, they can require that.
County commissioners for express approval?
Say that again, Terry, sorry?
The annexation, will the county commissioners have any, decisions to make, annexation, anything like that?
I do not believe we have much power on that. If the city, it comes down to the water, EDUs of the water. If we need more EDUs to develop a parcel, we have to get those EDUs from the city, and they have a written
I guess
policy.
my question is the property, all of the property in the city already in the city?
This census tract is not all in the city, it's about half and half.
Whether express approval is required would depend on what the proposed city zoning is on the property.
So the contiguous, information will decide all of that property to become city property. Half of it's in the county and half of it's in the city. I don't understand why there doesn't have to be an annexation agreement with the county unless it's contiguous and then they automatically annex in. Maybe
Yeah, I
that's,
think it would be contiguous. The express approval applies when there's a material difference between the county's zoning designation and what the city would be proposing after the annexation.
I mean, the city may require an annexation agreement, but not with the county, because it's with one other property owner, but with the property owner, that's what they do, that's what they do normally.
Commissioners, are you okay with the resolution as presented last week? Need a motion to adopt the resolution?
I motion to adopt the resolution for the requested expansion of the enterprise zone within the adjacent to the corporate boundaries of the city of Hagerstown.
Is there a second?
Second.
I have first and second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
5-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Jonathan, I guess you're coming back?
Yes, I am.
Okay, next on the agenda item, request funding to implement Maryland Money Market Program. And Leslie, are you joining us too?
Yes.
Folks, introduce yourself in the matter.
Jonathan Horowitz, Department of Business Development.
Morning, Commissioners. Leslie Hart, Department of Business Development. Commissioner Burkett, welcome aboard. I have a request today to you for $6,000 to be pulled out of the hotel rental tax. It's for the Maryland Market Money Program. The Maryland Money Market Program is designed to reach folks that are food insecure.
Yes,
People who are on SNAP and farmers market nutrition programs such as WIC and seniors receive coupons, and of course SNAP recipients have a limited amount of dollars that they are able to utilize to purchase fresh foods, meats, produce, all those kinds of things that are available at a farmer's market. With the recent pandemic, there has been a substantial spike in the number of people in Maryland and in Washington County receiving SNAP benefits. We need to really focus on those folks because of the food insecurity that we have. Farmers markets are getting ready to start effective in the May timeframe, and they will operate through the October timeframe. What I am requesting, the way the farmers market money program works is for every $5 that an individual spends utilizing their SNAP or their additional nutrition benefits, they get a matching $5. So their $5 just became $10. It is funded through SMATIC, and the Eastern Shore Tri-County Council is who operates the program. I have already been able to secure funds from them to support at least 5 local farmers markets. And I've also additionally received funding in the amount of $6,500 from the Western Maryland RC&D, Research Conservation Development Program. Those particular funds are designed to hire and employ an individual who will operate that program at the farmers markets. It is a seasonal part-time program, part-time position, and they will work at each one of the farmers markets, solely operating the farmers market money program. So what I'm asking of you today is a $6,000 motion to, out of the hotel rental tax, and to support this program for the 2021 year. Next year, this is a sustainable program. So after this year, the program will become the sole responsibility of all the markets. This is just simply to kick them off this year.
You just need a match.
I do. I already have concurrence from Budget and Finance. I've also worked with Purchasing and Human Resources on the hire and the way that we will identify this individual. So that's what I need today.
Motion to approve is presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Have first and a second. Any further questions? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Congratulations. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank
Commissioners.
you very much.
Yay.
Have a wonderful day. I'm gonna leave you.
Thank you.
Okay, we are about 30 minutes early. Next agenda item, business request for business incentive program for Hancock and Cascade. Jonathan?
Commissioners, Jonathan Horowitz, Business Development again. This item being brought to you today is in response to Commissioner comments that were made during open session in the March 30, 2021 meeting. The Department of Business Development met with County CFO Sarah Greaves to discuss potential economic development incentive programs for our Hancock and Cascade areas. So through that discussion, a high-level discussion, we were able to identify two sort of short and versus long-term programs. So the two ideas that we want to present to you today are a financial match program for an incentive of economic development. This would be a lower cost, shorter term impact, faster impact program. The other option in front of the commissioners today is obviously a public-private partnerships for infrastructure improvements, which the county has utilized in other areas of the county before. This option would be more of a long-term, higher investment, but higher return option, but definitely more on the long term. So you have a short-term, lower cost option, and we've presented a long-term, higher cost with more returns option. And these are just for discussion today. These are just in response to your inquiries for options.
I guess I need a little bit more, it sounds like on top, those are two great places to do this, but I need a little bit more elaboration on, the better of the two is the public-private partnership, but that also stretches it out a lot farther, doesn't it?
Randy, I don't know if I call it better. It's really just a longer term, higher investment, probably greater return avenue to take.
Which one would help those two communities the quickest and the best?
The matching program most certainly would be much faster, much easier to implement, much easier to manage, and return results much more quickly.
Okay.
Jonathan, we have from time to time for different projects all over the county implemented a pilot payment in lieu of taxes, where essentially the increase in tax base, correct me if I'm wrong, Kirk or John, but the increase in tax base is essentially not taxed. That money in turn can go towards financing the cost of the project. Is that?
I think that's, you wanna take that one?
Normally what happens is, when we've used them in the past, it's been the situation where the capital investment is very high, the property appreciates, and the benefit of the pilot is that it levels the revenue stream over the course of the project, so there's not a huge investment in capital as well as huge tax payments at the beginning, and then at the end of the life there's no investments and very small tax payments. So what it does is it allocates the taxes that would be due over the life of the project.
And I guess that's where I'm going with the tax payment that would have to be paid up front once that development, once the project, manufacturing facility, whatever it may be, is built, and then they have to start paying taxes on that structure. If that could be reduced, I'm wondering, are these the only two options we could look at? Could we potentially look at, for these communities, or if other communities are added, maybe a a pilot if it creates and generates jobs.
Yeah,
for a
absolutely.
community.
We're willing to look at any programs, and during the discussion with Sarah, we did discuss all the other options. These were just the two that we felt would have the greatest actual impact immediately or long-term. A pilot program, as Kirk was trying to explain, is more or less to help the prospect make a business case out of something that would normally have such a high barrier of entry. We wouldn't be able to get that type of development here. And while I certainly encourage those types of programs, I think that the type of projects we want to see come out of, the results we want to see come out of this are probably not going to be in that realm. Think more or less like a big solar project, like where the county has done these pilots before, is that to build the solar field and to buy all the equipment is just such an upfront cost, and the amount of power generated there's, kind of lower, so it takes longer to get that back, as Kirk said. So
I think we've also done some pilots for other types of projects as well. And in particular, I'm looking in Hancock, as we toured on Friday, the Orchard Business Park area that was just annexed, or is in the process of being annexed to the town limits. There could be a number of projects for that 100, give or take, parcel of land that may benefit from a pilot as well, or something where we reduce taxes, because the way I see it, at the end of the day, if that property isn't developed, we don't see a growth in the tax base anyway. But to have that developed, if we forego some tax revenue, but it generates jobs, we do win in the end, because if we did nothing, maybe that wouldn't be considered a location for a development project to go. So what do we gain if we offered nothing?
And I understand your point there. I have worked with several prospects on that park. Mm-hmm. So just in my experience of what business cases they're trying to bring to that for that development, I think that the existing statutory programs that we have through the Department of Business Development are already tax abatement programs.
Okay.
So yes, a pilot program, and I don't want to downplay a pilot program, are very effective. We've used them before, but we already have statutory programs on the books that will help to make the business case. If that is what they're looking for, is tax abatement or to even their tax payments, to help make their business case to say, yes, we're going to pull the trigger and do this investment here. We have other programs that kind of address that already. So it's not like we have nothing there. I think more or less what we were getting at with these, and we are thinking more or less like what you're thinking too, Wayne, is like the Orchard Business Park was kind of a way to frame this for us, is a matching program would be much faster to get a developer to come in there and say, okay, because we're waiting about a year for water and wastewater at that parcel, which is about right now to start talking to developers to work that parcel. So
would a matching program, say number one, to Wayne's example, that would take precedence over, would we still offer from our incentive? Would this be the incentive? Would there be anything on or above this number one?
We did not discuss that, but that's open for discussion. This is all up for discussion, so it's still open. Nothing's been decided.
Yeah, and my thoughts were, business developers that are going to be developing the property, they're going to be discussing to you, and even though we may agree to option one, they still have the ability to do all of the options plus the pilot. So you're going to put together a package for them that's going to meet their needs and give them the ability to move faster rather than be held up.
Correct, Terry. And I think what you just said helps to highlight what Sarah, Susan, and I were discussing in this meeting is what's really the most effective. Yeah. What can we do to get some results out of this now?
We're not just restricting ourselves to any one of these options. They're going to have many, many options, and we want the communities to know that we're here to help, and there's going to be, we want to hear what you need and what your thoughts are, and then we can go from there.
Absolutely, and anytime, every project's different, so we always try to tailor our incentives.
So basically an option package, and choose your weapons, choose what helps you the best.
The premise of this is to spur economic growth in those communities now in light of the potential school closing, so we can demonstrate that the economic development's moving in. Correct?
Correct. And if I were to advertise a match program being available in those municipalities, that
I guess
definitely spur development.
Yeah, I'll just say, obviously we weren't trying to limit. What I asked staff to do was to come back after the comments that the board made several weeks ago, to come back with some additional options other than what we already have, and to do things as quickly as we can. So, yeah, these are just some options we came up with. We wanted to keep the discussion going because this is what the board wanted us to do. So, obviously, we can go in any direction you want to go, but we wanted to make sure that we had some options for you and to keep the discussion going.
So what we want is something more specific brought back? Is that what we're?
I think, I don't know, I know for me, I'm options, and give staff the ability to utilize whatever options they need, bring the request back to us, and then we can approve from there.
I think,
When you get into the housing, I know, and I brought this up before many, many years ago, you know, back when housing was stagnant. You know, they weren't building after I think probably around 2007. And I always thought, why would we not let them use the first year of their taxes to build a home? So here's a case, I know Cascade, there's gonna be probably a lot of housing built up there. So there's a possible incentive, and I know staff doesn't like to go that route or anything, but my thoughts are they're gonna be paying taxes on homes and development way past the remaining years that I have. So, you know, I always thought that would be a nice little incentive to get somebody to build, do some housing, things like that. But that was the thought.
And we as our department has, you know, nothing against residential, it's just not been a focus of the area. But certainly as things have changed in the last 24 months.
Because, you know, I'm sure Cascade's looking at a lot of possible home renovations.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of homes up there.
There's just a lot of things happening in the last 24 months.
Could that be
really big?
I'm sorry. Could that be an option that's explored when staff brings back more recommendations? These are great that they help companies locate, and they obviously create jobs. But if we can provide a tax incentive, both of these outlying communities, we need to find a way to stabilize their population. And certainly bringing jobs into the community can do that as well. But if, you know, after COVID, I've heard a lot of people in the business community talk about there could be a real opportunity in Washington County to have growth for our population, whether it's a good or a bad thing, but to see our population increase because people are wanting to leave the more urban areas, to leave the large cities and get out in the country, get out in the clean air, so to speak. And we could see that opportunity if we could target where we want those, maybe the housing or set priority areas. And again, as Commissioner Klein said, in an effort to save our schools, if we can target the growth in those certain communities, I think that solves a lot of our dilemmas that are on our plate right now.
I totally agree, and workforce development and available workers is going to be an issue as we now see all these big companies coming in. They're all starting to do their hiring right now. It is going to be our next issue.
What's your take on new home construction right now?
It's crazy right now. Of course, the building materials are going out of sight, but I'm telling you, if I sell 70 homes a year, this past year's 50. It's like Wayne just said, coming from out of town for the working remote. There's a new world now. People are working from home, and I can't think of a better place if you have the right cable, which they do, work from home in Cascade or Hancock. I think it's coming. I think we're seeing our population growing, and I'm 100% to try to boost those economies in those two towns and get them stabilized. We win-win on all that.
Are the commissioners interested? There has been talk in other municipalities and other states about attracting remote workers. Is that something the commissioners would like to some sort of attraction program for that?
As long as my taxes go down.
Always trying to grow the tax base, Terry. We certainly are.
Okay, are you clear of any instructions to bring back more details?
Can I ask
Yes.
a question?
Yes.
So this program, is it, in my mind, when you were just talking about, I was thinking like it was only business growth. So can a developer of residential properties apply for this?
We didn't narrow that down yet, but normally our incentives through my department are based on capital investment and job creation. So they are somewhat tied to employment. And I think that's just a historical thing that the commissioners like to see is, you know, somehow tie it back to some job creation for the citizenry. But we're open to any discussion, and I personally think, you know, something to do with residential is going to become important soon as we start running out of workers because we have lots of new jobs coming.
Yes, I'm thinking that a developer that builds a house is going to sell that house ultimately make a profit off of it, whereas a business, bringing a business in,
Kirk, I might have to defer to you or someone on, I guess residential and business taxes are a lot different in terms of what we're trying to spur.
well,
Residential would be more complicated. I mean, you have a guy that builds a subdivision and he's making his money on his homes. There'd have to be something to attract permanent residents that are actually gonna benefit from living there. It would get, as Charlie said, it would get complicated with the residential, but there's gotta be a way to, I mean, you need humans there. And business attracts humans, so, I mean,
Well, our department feels that that's probably in the next 24, 36 months gonna be an issue that we're faced with. So, you know, if it's something we should start looking at now, it can't hurt to start looking at things.
And my comments on, deferring taxes for a year are specific to the Cascade and Hancock area.
yeah.
And that is how this discussion began, yeah. We try not to, internally also as staff try not to lose focus that we have good existing programs for the county in general. It's just that these two areas are somewhat underdeveloped and a little bit further away.
If they close the schools, it's gonna crush both those communities. And we need to be proactive of helping those. I mean, we've talked about it for 3 or 4 weeks now, so.
I would add, if we do something to provide a tax offset or something for a new home to be built in one of these communities, maybe this is too far in the minutia of today's discussion, but I think there should also be, it should be framed around a commitment for that homeowner to live there for a certain number of years. We need them to be a resident, not just a transient person moving through the community and taking that opportunity for low taxes. The idea would be for a long-term resident.
Yeah,
And just to summarize the commissioner's comments, then you would like staff to look into possible pilot programs and then something residential spurring. Correct?
Specific to those two areas.
Specific to those two areas,
Now, I know Wayne said be a resident for years, but I'm thinking about the Cascade community up there. There's a lot of housing on that Wcps base. So I don't know if they're gonna bulldoze it over. I don't know what their plan is with that. I think, two different things. They're already existing. They're gonna be renovating. And once they renovate those properties up there, they're gonna get a tremendous increase in the tax base on the real estate from those properties compared to what they're assessed at currently. And I don't know if they plan on selling them or renting them. But something that's already there, that's a blight, that they're going to improve, I think the rules need to be a little different for those projects over the newly constructed projects.
And it could be looked at creatively in
Yeah.
terms of SDAT valuations prior and afterwards,
And
et
again, it's
cetera.
gonna depend on the developer's plans and ideas and thoughts.
All right, do you have a direction?
I do.
All right, any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, staff. Obviously, staff will look through it. It'll be complicated, but we'll work through that and come back with.
Start somewhere to help.
Right,
you know.
that's right.
Bring
Well, that's what,
bodies
I mean,
into
that's
the
what we're trying,
community.
that's, for your direction, that's why we were heading this direction, so.
Next up, fiscal year 21 bond adjustment. Sarah, please introduce yourself in the matter.
Good morning, Commissioners. Sarah Greaves, Chief Financial Officer, here to present to you a budget adjustment for fiscal year 21 that has an impact on our upcoming bond sale that will be held in May. As you are aware, FY 21 bonds were allocated and approved through the budget for fiscal year 21 in last May of 2020. Bonds are always budgeted in the prior year and issued in the following year. So recently, the Board of Ed brought to you a budget adjustment that included the transfer of funds from Sharksburg Elementary and BISFA as a result of budgetary savings. The adjustment in front of you includes the portion of bond funding to Sharksburg Elementary in the amount of $1,873,841. The Sharksburg construction is complete, so therefore these bonds should not be included in the upcoming sale that we have set for May. Before the county can proceed with the bond sale, a decision must be made on whether to remove this amount from the sale or to redirect it to Board of Education capital maintenance projects. In the past, the Board of County Commissioners have redirected funding, but that is why I'm here today, to see if there's a consensus from the board. Otherwise, it would have to be removed from the bond sale in May.
Sarah, I have a question. If we are to allow this to continue to be appropriated towards BOE capital projects, do we have discretion over which projects that money be applied to?
I believe it is within the county commissioner's discretion to allocate the funding and restrict it. I don't think there's anything that prohibits that, if that's the board's desire.
I'd like to make a suggestion, see if my fellow commissioners like this idea. We've heard, going back on the topic of school closures in our Cascade and Hancock communities, part of the reason those schools are being looked at for closure is deterioration, I suppose, of the school. They've been many years without some needed capital improvements. Could we allocate this money to the Board of Ed, but specify that it go towards capital projects at those two elementary schools under consideration for closure? Help alleviate that concern of the condition of the buildings.
Not to give you, not to give you an answer. I thought there was 2 schools involved when they first came in and made their presentation.
Yes, sir, there are, and they will still probably come back to the Board of County Commissioners for approval for the other amounts, because this is only the portion that affects me in my bond sale. There were other revenues. There were other revenues from excise tax and also general fund that went into Sharksburg and the UIP that they were asking to have redirected as well. I'm not here on their behalf. I'm on here for the county and our current bond sale. So what I'm here today for only is contributing to the bond money that was involved in that transfer request.
So just to summarize what Commissioner Kiefer was saying, fiscal impact, $1,873,841. Could we say, fine, but it has to go to capital improvements of Cascade and Hancock? Can we do that?
I think so.
I think that's what we should do.
Well, is there a motion to say so?
I'll make a motion to approve the budget judgment as slightly modified as presented to allow the Board of Ed that capital monies. However, it will be targeted towards Cascade and Hancock Elementary School improvements that are needed.
Is there a second to that motion? Second. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, I do have a question. Is there any way that you would know if the board has already appropriated money for Hancock Elementary in their current capital budget book, already earmarked for Cascade and Hancock?
I have that
Elementary School?
information upstairs. I don't have it with me, but I could get it for you probably. I think I have a listing of all of their capital maintenance projects that they anticipated on doing for the next 10 years.
So would you want this in addition to what's already in the capital?
In addition, absolutely.
Okay,
Got a first and a second, right?
we have first and a second. Any other comments?
One comment, if I can make. This is the portion allocated to the Sharksburg Elementary School, correct? And I think it's appropriate that the schools we're looking at here, those elementary schools, are all in our outlying communities. So Sharksburg, they received a new elementary school. Cascade in the upper northeast corner and Hancock in the upper northwest corner. This money really targeted our outlying communities in total, the 3 points in Washington County. I think that's a good thing.
All right, I have first and a second. Any further comments? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
I vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sarah, this will allow you, now that the commissioner made that motion, this will allow us to go ahead and transfer that money and do the bond sale.
That's correct.
So that will be part of the bond sale.
It will be part of the upcoming bond sale in May, yes. One of the requirements whenever we have adjustments is that they occur before the bond sale, and we provide all the documentation to our bond counsel.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next agenda item, we're 25 minutes early, but I think we'll proceed if all is okay with that. Next up, fiscal year 2022 general fund budget.
Thank you, Commissioner. Sarah Greaves, Chief Financial Officer. I'd like to take a couple minutes before the budget discussion to talk about county funding for the Board of Education, basically the county's overall commitment. I'm going to ask in the back if, yep, they can flip the slide. Okay, great. Flip the slide again for me, please. Thank you. Maybe a little bit difficult on the screen to read that, but the county commissioners are committed to education. We appropriate 49% of the budget to education. That 49% is made up of 43% to the Board of Ed, 5% to HCC, and 1% to the cost for libraries. The second largest expenditure that the county has next to education is law enforcement, which comes in at 15% of the budget. So as you can see on the screen, half of the pie, almost half of the pie, is dedicated to education. Please flip the slide. The amount per pupil funding is shown on your screen with the bars. You can see that this funding has increased substantially over the years. The county currently provides $4,700 per child, and the state provides $8,300 per child, which is a combined amount of $13,000 per student. Interesting, if you look over to the chart next to that, is that the enrollment has only increased about 3% over the past 10 years, while the cost per pupil has increased for the county by 15% for the same time period. Next slide, please. Here's a chart showing history of wage increases. It is true that the county is proposing a step and a COLA for employees in fiscal year 22. This chart in front of you provides a 20-year history of the county's annual increases as compared to some of those in our peer group. The top line, which is the blue, represents the Board of Education increases. The line below that represents Frederick County, followed by the yellow line, which is the city of Hagerstown. And finally, the bottom line in red or orange on your screen is Washington County. This shows you that if, oops, go back, yep. This shows you that if all entities began in 1999 with a wage of $31,000, the Board of Ed would be paying around $72,000 for that wage today, and the county would be paying $59,000. So it's a nice illustration of the differences in our increases over time.
So the basic Board of Education got a lot more money than we did, raises. That's a good summary, right?
Their increases have been more than the county's, yes, absolutely. Next slide, please. With that, this information for WCPS employee count has come from our annual official statement. So as long as the information that we received was good at the time, these should be accurate figures. The employee count at the Board of Ed does show an increase over the last several years. I do believe this includes part-time positions. On the chart next to that, you can see the starting teacher salary, which is currently at $55,726. If you apply the same wage for a 12-month period, because we know that amount is for approximately 10 months, then you would have an annual salary of $66,871. Next slide, please. The chart on the left shows funding history for the Board of Education over time. The different colors on the bars represent a few different things. In 2009 to 2012, which is what you can see, you have some bars with yellow on them. The county contributed to other costs, such as buses, nurses, and crossing guards. That amount was separate from our maintenance of effort. However, in 2013, which is the first bar that you see with orange, the county was mandated to take on additional costs related to teacher pension. As you look to years 16 and 17, which is the last row, the last bar with orange on it, you can see that the orange line's removed and it's replaced with blue in 2017. This reflects that pension amount being combined into our maintenance of effort. The chart next to that shows that Washington County, again, is coming in providing 43% of budgeted dollars to education for the Board of Education. You can see Washington County is in the dark blue. If you look at all of the counties in Maryland, Washington County ranks higher than half of them. And if you look at Washington County's peer group, which are in light blue, if you look at Garrett and Allegheny County, Washington County far exceeds their contribution of their budget at 33 and 35%. And we much closer reflect Frederick County, which is 46%, a little bit higher than ours. But there's a case to be made that the county does heavily invest in Board of Education. Next slide, please. These slides represent fiscal note information from House Bill 1300 related to the Kerwin Commission. There has been updates over this current legislative session for these charts, but I think they're still significant. The first chart shows the direct state aid for Board of Education's and an increase from what the current law is. And if you add up those increases over that 10-year period, so if you add up fiscal year 22 of 17.5, 23 of 20 million, you're going to see combined they reach over $300 million in additional funding. The chart to the right shows the per pupil amount and how that will increase over time. And I think the point of these charts is to show that with this new legislation, the Board of Education will be receiving additional funding for education. Next slide, please. Again, I just bring this forward to you today, commissioners. There's been a lot of discussion about county funding for education. I think that the commissioners are invested in education. I think the numbers show that. Our per pupil amount increases annually, and I think it's important that we share that information with the public. Are there any questions on the information that was presented?
Just maybe how much will the Kerwin affect us?
Well, there's been some new charts out. Now, the charts that were provided last year showed that Kerwin would affect Washington County by our current trend, which is 2.5% per year. So as long as we maintain that current trend, we should be okay. But I did have a chance to look in the, I don't know if it's Kerwin 2 or, I was trying to find some additional information. And there were some increases in there in the out years. So I have to look at that a little bit further to see if that's, $1 million more than our 2.5% trend. Because if you look in it, some of the time it'll say zeros across all 10 years. Well, that doesn't mean zero additional dollars. It just means 0% more than what you've been doing. So definitely 2.5% per year. There may be increases other than that, though, with the new legislation that was passed this session.
Sarah, do you have the clicker where you can go back some slides? Are you able to do that?
I'm not sure if this is working, but the folks in the back, yeah, which slide would you like, sir?
That one right there.
Okay.
I hear a lot, and just so you can help us clarify and understand a little better, I know I've heard it before, but it's always good to restate it from time to time, that the county commissioners, a different group of county commissioners than this group, stopped funding for school nurses, buses, and crossing guards. And it seems like in the chart that you shared with me a while back, there was a transition from the county paying for those items and a switch to the county paying for part of the pension costs for the teachers. There was a trade made at some point between the yellow and the orange bars, but funding still continued to trend upwards.
That's correct.
So is it fair when it's said that we cut funding for the school nurses and crossing guards? That was substituted for a different allotment of money that the Board of Ed received from the county, correct?
Yeah, essentially. The Board of Ed, did become responsible for those costs, but at the same time, the county didn't reduce the funding towards education. It was redirected.
Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioners, any questions for this? If not, not, Sarah, please continue.
Okay. Sorry, let me find my book here. There we go. All right, thank you, Commissioners. Here before you for draft 4 of the general fund budget. Fiscal year 22 general fund proposed budget is currently $254,535,100. $2,390,000 remains in the 22 budget for one-time appropriations. I was here a couple times before you, and we discussed a couple ways that we could use the excess funding. I would like to.
What was that amount again?
$2,390,980. $2,390,980. As discussed previously, this funding is available for fiscal year 22. We expect funding to be available in 23 and 24, but in 25 and 26 in the 5-year plan, we do still have a $1 million deficit. I believe it's 1.3 million, and that is attached to the ARF as well as we move forward. So some of the options for consideration for the board for this one-time funding includes additional pension contribution, funding for capital projects, whether it be for the Board of Education or other outside agency one-time needs. The economic development point that you just heard from Mr. Horowitz, you know, that incentive, I believe, was to come from this one-time funding. And then, of course, we heard earlier from Ms. Buchanan on the COF funding, and the board appropriated $55,000 of this towards that effort, with the $45,000 remaining to be appropriated. So I'd like to take a couple minutes just to ask the board what your thoughts are on the one-time funding and the allocation of those funds.
Yeah, I have a thought. On the one-time, well, I have a question. On the one-time funding, that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to use it this particular upcoming year.
No, sir, you can appropriate to capital and it can stay in reserves.
We just appropriated $10 million of surplus to capital.
Yes, sir. For designated projects, this would stay in reserves to be used at a later time for a
So
one-time.
why couldn't we take that? Why couldn't we take that money and use it for future years to pay our firefighters?
Because this is one-time funding, we would always recommend from a finance level that one-time funding is used for one-time projects and not for recurring expenditures. It's how you get some.
But we could.
You could. I wouldn't recommend it, but you could.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think on how to get me in out years where I don't have to worry about, you know, for the next 6, 8 years, I don't have to worry about how I'm going to fund our firefighters.
This funding would not even provide for 1 full year of firefighters.
But it's close. You need about 20. How much you need for one year?
In the current year, you need 2.7. If there are wage increases.
Why would we need 2.7? I thought that was a grant.
Oh, that is a grant. Yes.
3 years.
3 years of a grant.
Yeah.
Yep.
So my thoughts were, add a little bit to that. That gets us a 4th year. You have you put 10. These are just my thoughts. I'm not asking for agreement. You have $10 million in the capital of surplus in the capital. I mean, we could easily set that program up for.
That $10 million has already been appropriated to projects, so it's not available for use.
We voted on those projects?
Yes, in the beginning of February.
Did I support them? I didn't
Yes,
support
sir.
them.
I think you did.
I voted against the $10 million going, I thought the $10 million should have gone back to the taxpayers.
Okay, maybe you didn't.
I don't think that was unanimous.
Okay, maybe you didn't.
They were just some of my thoughts. You asked us for our thoughts on one-time expenditures. So to me, I want to make sure that
I think the problem with, you know, some of taking money from reserves and using it for operating cost is, you know, once you get into years 5 and 6 and 7, you have yourself a problem because you can't sustain yourself using reserves. And that would be my concern from a financial standpoint.
I think, though, you're taking money that was in the budget though, and you're just putting it in reserve. So it's not like it was already in reserve and you're taking it out. In other words, you're throwing that money back into a reserve account, but yet it was already spoken for at one point. That makes sense?
No.
Okay.
It's one-time funding. Best practice is to use it towards a one-time project.
One thing that concerns me about one-time funding, what is truly one-time funding? Some capital projects will continue to need operational expenses. You know, if we build new roads, new bridges, that's great, but then that's new roads that we have to maintain that at some point down the road we'll need repaved, or rebuilt, or something. So when we say one time, I'd like to be careful about some of those one-time expenses, while they may show up in capital, will still require additional funding down the road.
That's true. There's maintenance costs related to some one-time projects. For instance, the $13 million Police, Fire, and Emergency Services training facility. That's going to increase our operating costs by approximately $400,000. That's a recurring cost. That was a one-time cost, and then it would be a recurring cost. So absolutely, that does occur.
Did we not discuss putting some of that in retirement pension?
We did, and that is an option.
Isn't that pretty critical?
I think it's critical. We're 53% funded for our pension.
What level would you recommend?
I'm sorry, sir?
Our pension percent.
What would I like our pension percent to be? A healthy pension percent is 80%. We do have a plan in place to build ourselves up to that, but I think that it's a reality that the commissioners definitely should be aware of. Fulfilling the obligations that we have to our employees. And every little bit helps. The sooner the money goes into the pension fund, the sooner it starts earning interest and the more compounding impact it has.
Is 53% critical?
Because what's more important than the 53%?
I mean, we at a critical stage, only having 53%.
I would say what's most critical is that we have a plan in place to fund it. While it will take 20 years, we have a plan. So I'm not going to say it's absolutely detrimental. I don't want to.
If we do nothing, it would be critical.
Well, if we did not fund it, that would be critical.
And as people retire, that fund draws down, correct?
Sometimes it's a balancing act, and there are a lot of actuarial assumptions that go into that. Sometimes those assumptions in the past have been inaccurate or did not reflect actual results. And so, we may have been higher funded before, but then our funded ratio came down because some of those assumptions were off.
An example of something that was inaccurate, that adversely affected our pension funding.
When we changed actuaries back, maybe it was like 4 years ago, the new actuary discovered that the liability was not accurately reflected for the drop participants in the plan. And so that contributed, I think, to several percentage points drop in our pension funded ratio. I think it was 5% point drop. So let's say if we were at 65, it would have dropped to 60 because of that liability not being accounted for. So there have been things like that have happened. Occasionally, the actuaries do studies and they revise their assumptions to be more in line with actual experience. I believe that happened in 2018 or 19, and some of those is like the mortality rates, wage, some of those things go into that assumption. And they revise those estimates, and that contributes too. Another main thing that contributed was we used to have a 7.75% assumed rate of return. That rate of return was not being met. That goes back into the assumptions that are used. So that's, that needed to be lowered. We lowered it to 7.5%, and then we lowered it again to 7.25%. What that does is it increases the liability. And when it increases the liability, but we don't increase our assets, the funded ratio goes down.
Sarah, retiree COLAs, that's something we discussed the other day, and there was a couple-year period where the commissioners approved a 3% increase back-to-back years.
That's correct.
That also hurt our ratio as well, correct?
Well, it definitely impacted it, yes. I mean, those retiree COLAs, they're not assumed in our plan. We don't have that assumed in our plan from the actuary's perspective anywhere. And so what happens is when those retiree COLAs are provided, they have to be paid for over a 3-year period. The cost of them are not amortized over a 15-year period like some of the other costs. And so it's a direct hit to our actuary determined contribution for the next 3 years pretty heavily.
So does our actuary assume that there will be no COLAs?
That's
Is that
correct.
what
Our
you're saying?
actuary assumes there will be no retiree COLAs.
Okay.
Only potential COLAs for employees, active employees.
So some of the ways we can help improve this number is being just a bit more conservative in a number of things, including retiree COLAs, including pay raises in general.
The 53%, let me be clear, comes from our financial statements for our funded ratio, and that is based on GASB 68, and that includes, because it is required by GASB, to include an assumption for what we've done in the past. And what we've done in the past is an approximate, on average, 1.2% retiree COLA. So some years we would have none, other years we may have a 2% or a 3%. Averaging out that is about 1.2%. The 53% includes a 1.2% assumption for COLA. The actuary does not, and so their funded ratio is a little bit higher. Theirs is about 58%. So keep that in mind as we discuss this. There's about 5 or 6 percentage points between the two. So if we don't give retiree COLAs, I would say you're more in line with a 58% funded ratio than the 53. But because we have historically, those numbers are included in our statements.
That $2,390,980, can that be used? You could put $2 million in retirement, right? And then you could put, you can diversify that. I mean, we got an email from the sheriff today where, now, because of past legislation, higher pays in Frederick County, we got a pretty good email from Sheriff Mondor that his department could be, losing officers or deputies, or they're, underpaid. I don't know, everybody needs body cams now, it sounds like. Everybody needs this and that. Can we help somewhere in that realm of the activity?
Again, my thoughts would be no, because that's a recurring expenditure.
Okay.
And unless it was a one-time stipend of some sort. A one-time stipend of some sort would be okay, but not if it's recurring. I've seen an article or a couple things in the past about drivers for the Board of Education. I think that they're starting around $18 an hour, and I think our drivers are 14. So I think it's something that,
I was
it's not
just using
just
it as an
related to the
example.
police department.
Like you could give a hiring stipend, maybe just a one-time.
Yes,
You could.
you
Yeah.
could, absolutely. That's one
Brady,
time.
I've been a commissioner since 2006. I've heard the same discussions since 2006.
Right.
We're never, ever paying as much as the next county.
Yeah, but now legislation's really putting this new legislation with police bill of rights.
Mhm.
That's
I
a whole
understand,
different
and I
ballgame.
get all of that. I get all of that.
Yeah.
And, but we're gonna be faced with that argument next year, the year after. We
Right.
never give enough of money. We only have what we have.
Do you not think it's gonna get worse though with the way the country's going, that we're gonna be losing fire, rescue, police?
I think if you look at every county.
Is this the worst you've ever seen it?
I can't say if it's the
Worst
worst.
I've
or
ever
if it's
seen it.
the
I'm
best.
70.
Yeah.
So I'm just
I don't know,
preparing.
back during 2007, it was pretty bad.
Yeah.
When we were going through the downturn in the economy and all of that there. For me to be able to say one year was worse than the other, I'm having a difficult time. But the facts are, we only have so much money. We can only do what we have.
I understand that.
I'm certainly not for increasing taxes. I
No,
think you know
I'm not
that.
either.
I'm for trying to figure out a way to keep more of the money in the employees of Washington County, everybody's income. We talked about earlier water, sewer rates. All of our fees, all of our rates keep going up. Taxes are going up. Income's really not
But
keeping pace.
Terry, in real life, I could ask 100 citizens out there if they're willing to pay 40 to 60 cents a day to have somebody show up at their house, a first responder. Every one of them would be throwing $2
Okay,
at
and
you.
then I've thrown out suggestions that that has never got any traction. I've thrown out suggestions. I would never increase taxes, but we could very easily put in a tax statement asking people if they would like to increase their property taxes. And if they would voluntarily want to do that, I'm all for that. I have no problem doing something like that. I'm not gonna set and increase taxes. We could generate possibly millions of dollars that way, and that would be through you receiving a tax bill asking for an emergency services tax increase on your property taxes, and you would have the right.
We've never increased property taxes. 20 years.
Well, Republicans have never increased any taxes in
And
Washington
never increased
County.
property taxes in 20 years, 40 to 60 cents a day to make sure we have fire, rescue, police,
I think
and a
they're paying
deficit.
that
We
now.
had $400,000 deficit.
They're paying that now.
But Commissioner Wagner, also keep in mind, without raising the rate on a per year basis, the county is generating $70 million more a year than that historical time frame that you just mentioned, because property values increase, because wages increase. So what we're taxing is valued at more. So even without a rate increase, we do generate more money.
There's no doubt about it.
Just keep that in mind.
Economic development adds money to it.
And, you know, I read the sheriff's email as well, and it's something that we've heard before. Frederick County pays more than Washington County. I bet you Allegheny County's trying to keep up with Washington County. I bet Frederick County tries to keep up with Montgomery County, and Montgomery County keeps up with what, DC?
You know, our first responders, though, are under attack. Nobody in this room can deny that. They're under attack. We just proved it in legislation this week. They're under attack. I've never seen that before. I've never seen that before. All of our first responders are under attack. So I think we really got to be diligent that we don't let everything we do money-wise benefits the citizens. We're not doing this to buy a new Lamborghini. We're doing this to make sure the citizens are taken care of. It's all directed to the citizens. Everything I do is directed at a citizen. I'm giving you better service. Would you pay 40 cents a day like I voted for 2 years ago to have an ambulance show up at your house or a police officer? I know you guys have heard the argument, but it's getting worse, guys. It's getting worse. Watch the news. See what's happening in the country. We got to take care of and anything we take from them, from the county, we deprive the citizens of services. What if we eliminate, there's always waste. There's always waste. I'll never argue. What if you eliminate a couple people to give more money to fire and rescue? Well, the citizens suffer. Trees are down. Potholes are there. Snow's not being removed. You know, I know you've heard it, Terry. You've been in this a long time.
I've heard it. Yeah, I've heard it.
But I live in the community. You know, I contact a lot of people every day.
Well, the facts are, we didn't have to raise income taxes.
I think we did.
Well, no, we didn't. We have, look at the surplus we have.
What?
Well, explain the
I'd like to
surplus,
talk
because
about
that's
the
an artificial.
Yeah, let me hear about
We had a $3.9 million
Commissioner
deficit.
Kiefer wanted to do was make some adjustments back then that would have easily.
I think anything we
prevented.
do, we defund first responders and police.
Oh, I disagree with you.
First
There-
of all,
Down to priority.
that income
Down
tax
to
rate raise,
priority.
because the former administrator, Rob Slocum, presented us in February 2019 with a $3.9 million shortfall in revenue. And at that time, the SAFER grant was not supposed to be 100% funded. So income tax rates was to make up for that $3.9 million shortfall and the $2.7 million we had to pay over 3 years for the SAFER grant. Am I
Okay, so
approximate rightly on
Please
those
keep
numbers?
in mind, commissioners, for fiscal year 21, the current year that we're in, the only reason we have a surplus is not because we didn't anticipate this money coming from the tax increase. We did anticipate it coming. We wrote down our revenues to protect ourselves against COVID-19. Revenues came in over what we wrote them down, but we still expected them. We had a 5-year plan in place. We have increased our expenditures over $18 million over the past 2 years. Capital, 33 firefighters, 7 EMS, 5 other new positions, P25 lease that we expect, police, fire, and emergency services training facility. All of these things are going to add recurring costs to the county. And the increase that you see in 21, the reason we had that $10 million adjustment wasn't because, you know, we didn't really expect that money. It wasn't over what we expected. It's not a recurring surplus. It's going to be absorbed with all of these commitments that we've already made as a county. The February distribution is only the result of state legislative changes that happened in 2020 as related to pass-through entities. There was a $9 million appropriated to the county because of these pass-through entities, they had paid their tax liability in December rather than quarterly. What does that mean for the county? It doesn't mean it's additional funding that's going to be recurring. It means it's a change in the way the funding's being distributed. Instead of getting it in 4 quarterly installments, we're getting it in a lump sum. That means lower quarterly distributions going forward. That was also recommended from the state. Do not bank on this money coming in addition. You need to understand that this is going to offset in future quarters.
Sarah, if I could just jump in, you know, one thing that I pride your department on and departments across the county, part of the reason, I believe it was a $12.5 million surplus that we had in our fiscal year that ended July 1st or June 30th. Initially, we put $3 million, I believe, into capital, and we came back and put the other $10 million into capital. Part of that surplus was because, correct me if I'm wrong, not only were revenues a little higher, but because the county was also able to cut some expenses. We had some positions that went vacant and unfilled for a number of months.
We did.
We had just expenses in general. We were able to tighten the belt.
We had
That's
hiring
a great thing.
freezes.
Just a moment. That's a great thing that we were able to tighten the belt and still provide those services to our citizens that they needed. I think we've proven that we can work on a leaner budget. That's all I'm saying. I think we've proven that fiscal year that ended last summer, where our revenues were a little higher than anticipated, our expenses were less than anticipated, prove that we can make those cuts.
Just from an employee perspective, that's all this is. When we have vacancies, other employees have to step up and take care of that. And that can happen for a short period of time. But expecting that to happen for a long period of time, I think is unrealistic from an employee's perspective. There are vacancies that we have right now that we could say we're going to do a hiring freeze, but some of those vacancies are needed positions. Some of those vacancies are responsible for meeting state requirements, or think about the NPDES permit that we have coming up. I think we have to meet requirements by 2024. There's 2 positions in our fiscal year 22 budget to help meet those goals, those requirements. If we don't have employees to do some of this work, we're not going to meet some of the requirements that we have that are mandated by the state. That's a concern too.
And I know all the commissioners are getting phone calls, things that aren't happening. You know, whether it be planning, zoning, can we work the health department, even though it's not us, to help us get this stuff done? I got 2 emails this week. There's little Johnny's gonna get run over there speeding through my neighborhood. Okay, I'll make one phone call to the sheriff, and guess what? There's 3 cruisers out there for 3 days. He had the manpower. He won't have that. It worries me. It really does, guys. It worries me.
Can I say something? I don't think there's anybody around this table or in county that want to do anything to public safety. And to constantly dwell on that is fear-mongering.
I disagree with that right away. I can't have you make that accusation.
No, I agree
Not
with
like
it.
that. That's
I
not
agree
fair
with
to
it.
say.
Can I
Your
finish?
first meeting
Can I
here,
finish?
and you're accusing us of fear-mongering?
No,
That's
I'm
what you
saying
just said. You need to retract that statement. That's not fair, Charlie.
It's conjecture.
No, it's not conjecture. Your first meeting here, and you're accusing us of fear-mongering. Thank
Listen,
you
you
for.
can take it any way you want. The other things.
I will, and I did take it.
You can't sit there and only focus on, and the other thing with this whole thing is everybody's focusing on the money that we have right now. Nobody's thinking Amazon's coming in. All these other areas are coming in. What's going on up in Hancock? What's going to happen in Cascade? All these extra areas of revenue. And, you know, I respect Randy. I know him better than anybody else on this board. But to sit there and say that, you know, we're not going to have this service or that service, I don't think is a fair statement.
But it's fair. You weren't here this past year when we were failing calls. We weren't getting people. And if it was your wife, your child, you, me, whoever, laying there waiting for an ambulance, and that might be fear-mongering, but it happens. It happens all the time. We failed calls. What do you think we're concentrating on this fire and rescue for?
Sure.
Now, I'm not doing it because I'm in love with fire and rescue. We need them. We failed calls. You need to talk to our directors.
I'm not suggesting we cut in that area, but there are other areas that we
If
can
you
do
cut,
better in.
then you're gonna collateral damage. There's
like-
always waste.
I
Always
agree
waste.
exactly. Emergency service should be at one of the fronts of our responsibility. I have no problem with that. And I would never, ever cut my emergency services I'm never going to be interested in cutting anything from the 33 firefighters that we're going to hire. All I'm saying is we need to study our budget. We need to quit spending, number one. We need to quit spending and focus on the amount of money that we actually have to work with and prioritize. And we could easily, I mean, I'm certainly never, ever not going to support my firefighters or my emergency services. And they're going to be one of my top priorities. They always have been since 2006, and they're always going to be. That's all I'm saying is we've got to reprioritize. I took a class at Mako probably, I don't know, 6 years ago. And this was probably toward the end of the recession. And the instructor emphatically just emphasized government minimum at all levels, minimum 10% waste. All we have to do is start going through our budget line by line item. The commissioners need to engage in that, and we need to start looking at our budget. And
Terry, I would never argue that. Never
Okay,
argue.
so
We're on
all I'm
agreement,
trying-
80% of our budget's
I
locked
think
up.
coming off a pandemic and not even coming off of it yet, it sounds like, just seeing where we're at, we just better be careful. We don't know
And
what
that's
the
one of
collateral
I
damage will be.
understand, but that's one of the reasons I'm interested in rolling back the tax rate, the income tax rate, is because of the pandemic.
That's right.
You know, it's costing me more and more. You know,
If
I
you
need
roll
more
it
and more
back,
money.
you know you're gonna lose to 2.8, you're gonna lose $17 million. You know that, right?
I don't think it's 17.
It is $17 million,
If we
and
roll it back,
and-
17 million
Okay,
bucks.
so
I will
let me ask you another question. Okay, so 2021, it looks like our budget was 235 million.
that's right.
2020, it was 233 million. This year, it's 254 million.
That's right.
Okay, so what's the projection for next year?
The change, the projection for '23 is 260. And the difference is where that money, or why that budget increased. It increased because we restored capital funding. We had no funding going to our capital projects. And these are capital projects, mind you, that require cash, not roads, not bridges. These are cash required, meaning they're equipment for our highway personnel. They're systemic projects out of the detention center. They are 5% match for airport projects that we get $6 million in funding for. They're matched for parks and
But
rec.
that shouldn't be part of the 18 million increase.
It is
That was-
part. We had no money in 21's budget for capital, none, except for
I'm
what
talking
went to
about
the police,
airport.
fire.
I was referring to the airport. That's already factored in. That's an incurring cost, isn't it? The 5%?
The
Well, I mean,
5%
that's
is
always
for
been-
capital. On the operating side, we don't contribute anything to airport right now from the general fund, but the capital side is included. So we've restored capital funding. We've increased EMS personnel by 7. We've increased firefighter personnel by 33. We have the Police, Fire, and Emergency Services training facility that's coming online next spring. There's money to that. We've increased volunteer incentives by $450,000. We've increased costs for volunteers by $50,000 for cancer screenings. We've done a third-party review for fire and rescue expenditures, which is $100,000. We've had 4 new call takers. We've had a new CAD IT person for public safety. We've had fire operation costs increasing for part-time and overtime. We've had employee steps and COLAs. That's true. We have had employee steps and
Can we talk
COLAs.
about that for a second? A couple years ago, we revised our wage and step scale increase to look at a 2.5%. It was a 3.5% between the steps, is that right? And we
That
went
is
to
correct.
2.5%.
Why
So-
go ahead.
So, I think we did the 2.5% to be more in line with some other entities. I think the Board of Ed was 2.5%. I may be wrong on that, but
What we were finding was that there was an imbalance between the COLA and the step, and that the 3.5% step allowed no room for a COLA to be provided. So the problem there is to strike a balance, because when you have a COLA and you have no step, then you have seasoned employees making the same amount at the minimum that new employees are making. I had that in my office. We had a 3-year employee. We had a new employee come in. They're making the same wage because we only gave COLAs because that's all we could afford. When you have a step only and no COLA, then you don't ever increase the scale, so you fall out of line with your peers. We reduced it to set a balance so that we could try to provide both a step and a COLA annually.
okay. And I think we were very fortunate to be in a position to do that, especially during the pandemic when many companies, we didn't fill vacancies, but we didn't lay off employees. I know many people who were laid off from their jobs. we didn't cut pay. I know many people whose salary, their hourly rate or their annual salary was cut so that business could get by during the recession. So we didn't have to do that. We didn't have to because we're government. And government has, it seems like government thinks it has an unlimited tax base, an unlimited source of funding, an unlimited source of revenue. But at the end of the day, it's taxes from its people. So I think, as Commissioner Burkett said, during the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic, I think our citizens are due a little bit of a tax reprieve. We just talked about possibility of giving funding, and it's a great program, great plan, giving funding to businesses, giving economic incentives for them to come here, and that's important, don't get me wrong. But what about economic incentives for our citizens to live here? I think that's something we need to consider as well.
Terry was talking about 10% waste in the county. Can you please share with the other commissioners what you shared with me last week about this idea? I've been told that on average there are 30 vacant positions in the county. And you shared with me that there's a way of removing them from the budget so that you have a more realistic view of the budget. Can you share that with the...
What we were speaking about was budgeting for turnover. The county in the past has not budgeted for turnover. So while we know we do have some vacancies that occur annually, can be different departments. Maybe one year it's more heavy in highway, maybe another year, a different department. We do have vacancies every year. Now, the county hasn't budgeted for vacancies. There's a couple reasons that are probably why. When we lose employees, we have to pay out vacation, accrued personal time. Some positions require us to pay another employee an increase. So there's flexibility there. If you don't budget for the vacancies, then you have the money available to do those types of policy-driven items. So that's something. We sometimes, depending on the position, can incur overtime. So for instance, in my department, a higher level position, whether they work overtime or not, they may not get overtime. But in the sheriff's office, when there's vacancies, they may incur overtime. Same with EMS. So that vacancy savings does provide some flexibility. Also, as the commissioners are aware, during the year, a lot of items do come up that need funding or required funding. A lot of the times that these items come up, they're a priority, because if they weren't a priority, the commissioners would push them off to the next budget cycle. But sometimes they come up and they come to me and ask where are their savings, and a lot of times those savings come from vacancies. So yes, it's true that we can budget for turnover, and that'll reduce our budget. It'll also reduce flexibility for the commissioners.
My last comments, and I'll get off of it, is if we would go back to 2.8, it's 17 million. If we go back to 3, it's about 10 million. So rolling back a little bit, and Terry, I know you believe this, you never defund fire and rescue, but if we go back that much,
there's not going to be
and
money.
and somebody's going to take a critical hit, and it's not going to be a couple employees. If we have to make up 17 to 10 million, we're defunding somebody.
Well, for instance, our outside agencies that we provide funding to, they're our community partners. We provide about 18 million in funding to our outside agencies, not including the Board of Education. A 20% cut on 18 million is around $4 million in cut. So if each agency would take a 20% cut from the county, what would that look like? And how would that affect the services that they provide to our citizens? I think that's part of the conversation, because the bulk of our budget we can't touch. We give 10 million to HCC. They also keep the rates low for in-county, people to attend the school. Would that mean that rates would go up? I think everything that we do has an impact on our community, and that's something that should be considered as we make these decisions.
I would just wish everybody would just take this year, get out of this pandemic, and look at every line item we vote on, and think and have this discussion the next budget year. That's what I'd like.
And Randy, what I would be interested in is rolling back the tax rate and then taking the year to do what you just suggested, line by line item. And then in 1 year, if we need to increase the taxes, then we can talk about it.
I'm sure not going to reduce them, then increase them again. That's the hardest thing I ever did.
Well, my comment, Mr. Baker, I've worked with you for 10 years. I've known you for 50. And I never doubt your sincerity and argued with you and called you names in public. So I respect your opinion. I hope as a board, we all can work together and find some medium where we can assure we don't have these unintended consequences as long as we're still funding our police officers and public safety.
And that-
I think there's a will, there's a way.
Yep.
So I'm
I agree
asking
with
all of
you.
you to join arms and hands to look out for the betterment of the community, at the same time looking out for everybody at a whole. That's my pledge to you,
Thank you.
okay?
And my pledge to you is
Thank
my
you.
priority will
And-
be emergency services.
And prior to this meeting, we had a brief conversation in the hallway and said this to ourselves as former friends and colleagues, current friends and colleagues for decades. So I think
So-
we see some common ground coming here.
Yep, so with those kind remarks, and we have known each other
Well, let's,
over half a century.
we
I
knew
would- I
each
would-
other
I-
50 pounds ago.
Yeah, that's right. So
So-
personally, I would like to make a motion that we roll back the tax rate to the
Well, before we roll
2.8.
back the tax
Well, I'm
rates,
gonna make a motion.
but I'd like to, before we have that,
I'll
We'll
second
have a
it for discussion.
We'll have a discussion.
okay, there's a second.
So roll back the.
I'd like to see what the effects are before we vote on it, because I'll vote no right now.
Okay.
Because I want to see where the cuts and what we're going to roll back, what positions we're going to hire. Does it mean our employees and police fear mongering aren't going to get their raise at a time they're most needed? I've been in this seat for 10 years. I've seen public safety take a back seat, meaning firefighters and volunteers in career, cooking chicken, selling soup sales. I've seen our police out struggling. Mr. Baker, I even heard you many a times at the, and this is to your credit, Terry would stand up and say, you've saved us $40 million a year in payroll. We're here to support you. At a time when their need is great, and we put them on the back burner for 10 years, we're now going to defund them.
No, we're
That's
not.
what,
We
that's
just
my
said-
opinion.
No, you
That's
just
my,
said your
that's
pledge.
my
You just said your
opinion.
pledge,
That's
and
my opinion. That's what's gonna happen with this
Well, you just said
drastic
you
cut
weren't-
of
you said
money.
you were not going to.
If we've increased
I
positions,
see no other alternative.
we've increased positions by about the count of 50. So if those 50 positions are not gonna come from public safety, where are they gonna come from?
Those 33 firefighters will
Okay,
lose
well, I
their
think
job in
I
the
have a
4th
motion
year.
in a second.
That is
That's
fear
what-
mongering, and I would like to say with
Well, let me
Commissioner
put that
Baker,
as a
with my
question mark. Let
second-
me put
listen,
that,
with
let me
my second to that
restate
motion,
that.
it was with the understanding
Will
that
we
emergency
have the
services would
funding
not be
to
affected. Those
pay their
firefighters
salary?
are not going to be fired, Jeff. That is not fair. That's big government is what you're talking
Oh,
about. You're
no,
a big government
I
guy,
dispute that.
and that's fine.
No, I don't
But
agree
these are
with
big
your,
government conversations.
I don't
The
agree
government
with
is
your
needed to do
assessment.
everything.
I don't,
That's not-
all I'm
we're not big
asking for
government.
is to withdraw the motion so we can work out and see where these cuts would take place so we can make an educated decision.
I stand
If
behind
not,
my
my
second.
vote is no.
And
There's
I
a
work
motion
on
and a
others, I'm
second.
sure, as
How can you vote on this and not know
Let's
who
call
you're
for a
affecting?
vote. There's a motion and a second.
Can I just say that I just keep hearing, we can't do it, we can't do it, we can't do it, we can't do it.
I didn't say we
But
can't do it,
nobody's
I'm asking for a
looking at the-
compromise.
But nobody's looking at the positive. If I would have started my 3 businesses with the attitude of doom and gloom, I would have never even started. And so,
Well, I think trying to serve the public by giving them extra public safety is not doom and gloom, I think that's a positive.
I agree,
Then we all
and we're all
Well,
for that.
all I'm asking is to wait to make a recommendation to her to see where these cuts would come, and then we come back and bring them for that day. That's my compromise.
Sarah to ensure they don't come from the firefighters that were fired.
That's right, and that's my part, but what, the collateral damage of effects on services to our community will be what? That's what I'm asking. No one can sit here and say. Can you tell us what the collateral cuts are, what they're going to be? If we fully fund these firefighters, what are the other cuts?
You
Where's it
guys,
coming from?
I'll say, let me finish and
I'm
you guys
just-
can vote. You got your 3 votes, but let me say it before you
You've
get your
been
3
there
votes.
before, and I don't know if we have our 3 votes or not.
No, you
We only
got
have a
it.
motion
You
and a
got it.
second.
$17 million. You're going, you guys might not like the word defund, you're gonna defund something. You're gonna create a heck of a mess. $17 million. We're not talking 2 million, I'm in. $17 million. I just don't see how you do that, sitting here on a whim with a gentleman that served 1 day and do that. I don't see how that's possible. How you can make a decision to affect every county employee, possibly law enforcement, possibly, you said you're not going to, someone's gonna suffer for $17 million.
And Randy,
Somebody's gonna suffer.
and you made a decision to have every taxpayer suffer when you increased the tax rate.
You
from
go
No,
out
we
and ask
did. We
100
provided service
taxpayers.
for those taxpayers to have an ambulance
You
show
know what,
up
before I come
on
in
the
here, I
worst
asked my
day of their
biggest
life.
critic, for 40 cents or 50 cents a day,
You
what do
can
you want me to do? He said, leave it alone.
On the worst day of your life, you call that
I have a
911,
motion on the floor,
and you
and I'm
hope
not
someone
I'm
shows
done.
up.
I'm
All right, there's
good.
still discussion going on. I'll call for the vote
There's a process.
as soon as discussion's over.
No, I'm finished
But
discussing.
again, respectfully to you.
I agree.
First of all,
Thank you.
No, I think it's just a bad move, guys. I mean, do what you gotta do, but
Mr. Downey, do you have a statement?
Yes, pursuant to state statute, any, in this case, decrease of the rate would not become effective until January 1st, assuming that the comptroller was given notice of the rate change by July 1st.
So you'd have to make the motion effective to that rolling, is that correct? Is that what you're saying?
I'm just telling you, as a matter of law, you're not gonna,
Right.
this
It wouldn't be
year,
effective
the amount's gonna remain the same until December 31st, if the motion passes, and then July 1, it would decrease to 2.8.
July 1 of what year?
January 1.
January
January
1.
1.
January 1.
Assuming that we gave notice to the comptroller. by
2022.
By July 1.
And how would that affect the disparity grant?
I believe that the disparity grant would come through for fiscal year '22, and then in '23 it would be reduced back to
And-
$2 million.
And at 2.8%, what is our disparity grant award?
$2 million on 2.8%.
we lose 17 million.
It's 8.4 million in disparity grant on a 3.2%, so you gotta take into account the income loss as well.
Right.
So if you take it down to 3 million, you have about a $4 million decrease in disparity and a $5 million decrease in income. If you take it down to 2.8, you have about a $6.5 million decrease in disparity and 10 million, 11 million in income loss.
And that's on a yearly basis, right?
Annual basis,
Okay.
recurring
There's
loss.
something disparity grant, something I think is very important, and I argued at this point when taxes were increased, the disparity grant is not guaranteed, in perpetuity. You mentioned this legislation was changed to affect, make that.
They took away the sunset clause.
Still, it was at the governor's whim during this budget cycle as to what level he was going to fund the disparity grant. So we can't go down or operate the budget based on a grant that may not always be permanent. I think that's.
And it's not available always at 2.8 either, so it could always go lower. All right, do we have any more discussions? Call for a vote.
Could I just-
Everybody all right with that?
One last thing.
Go ahead.
I would really be interested in knowing what that savings would be if we took those 30 positions out of the budget.
Well, the savings to the current year wouldn't be anything because they are funded through the grant. The impact is gonna be felt in years 3, 4, and 5 when we don't have the grant money, to pay for.
I'm sorry, I meant like,
Regular employees.
Oh, for the
You
vacancies.
Yes, I'm
meant the
sorry.
30, we just do enough, what's the average salary, 50 grand
Let's say
times
50,000,
50,000 times
30.
the benefits,
We've
60.
got 1.5 million, and the pension has to be provided for regardless of the number of employees. So we still have to make our pension contribution, whether it's distributed
How
between
much
those
is that
30 employees or not.
approximately?
12 million in pension.
Now, how much if you didn't fund, if we don't hire 30 people here,
Vacancies.
that positions are open?
Well, it wouldn't change the pension costs.
Right.
So when we say benefits, I just want you to know, I can't calculate a savings from pension because we have to pay the
So
12
a couple
million.
$1 million we get, but, right?
Okay.
1.5 million is
So that's getting
50.
close to 17 million, we're getting there.
Terry,
Let's keep going.
So you're talking, you
Commissioner
were talking
Baker.
about, I'm sorry, you were talking about if we don't fill those vacancies, if we don't budget for
Yeah,
those
he's
vacancies.
not referring to the,
He's saying if we don't
No,
budget for
No,
those
no, no,
positions.
Regular
the
employees.
vacancies around county government,
That's right.
because we're not, okay, so that.
Jeff, I'm all for those positions.
okay,
All right, let's take
if
a
there's no
vote.
more discussion, but Commissioner Baker, just for clarity,
Yeah,
We
there's a
are gonna
public
have to
hearing.
prepare an ordinance or a resolution, so
Is there a
Well-
public hearing required?
I don't think there's a public hearing required for a rate decrease. However, there does need to be a resolution or an ordinance adopted, which is actually the effective thing, and I'm hesitant to have you move forward on something of this consequence without having the resolution or ordinance before you. We
What
can
I
certainly
would like-
have it, we can certainly have it for next week.
Commissioner Baker, would you just restate it? So we have clarity that you want to reduce it back.
reduce
So-
the income tax rate from 3.2 back to 2.8%.
And we have those,
And I want also included in that motion, I will not, I want the 33 firefighters, emergency services know that they are going to be my top priority, and I have no interest in reducing their funding.
How about the 800 employees, you gonna put that in there
Randy,
anywhere?
just what I said.
Oh, you're not gonna put that in there? Okay.
We're gonna find.
I don't know, is that appropriate to be in the motion, that part of the comment part about the funding?
Well, then
now?
I'm fine with
Or
it.
is it just
Well, I
roll
think
it
is
back?
appropriate, and let me
That could be
explain
part
why.
of the
Sincerely, let me
conversation and
explain why.
discussion.
We're directing staff, and let me second that so we can have discussion again. We are directing staff, we want our tax rate to be rolled back to what it was at 2.8% for the income tax rate. And we're telling staff that as you make those adjustments, we do not want our firefighters
Okay,
to be
well,
harmed. We don't want
as-
firefighters to be dismissed.
and,
That's not what we're saying. We want that to be held whole.
and part of the discussion, I'm in agreement with that. I'm asking not to vote for it today, so we can see what those adjustments to our budget will be, which departments, and that's all I'm asking. I think that's
I think
fair.
the vote is a clear path forward.
But I think we need to see what they are before we vote, but you've got the motion. I'm calling for the vote. All in favor for Terry's motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No.
I'll apologize to everybody in the community.
Charlie,
the
did you say yes?
employees.
Okay, I couldn't hear. That's 3-2, Carrie's motion carries. Mr. Downey, assign you guys to work out with Peter Francho and the rules on how we do that with a
And
public
bring the ordinance
hearing.
back.
John? And, hearing no more discussion, I need a motion to go into closed session.
Oh, I thought we were done with closed
We have 1 second closed session going on today.
Motion to go into closed session.
Is there a second? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Oh, there it is.